Now, let's take you back to 35 years ago. In November 1989, the brutal suppression of a student demonstration in Prague sparked anti-government protests across Czechoslovakia. The students were joined by scores of others, and some 500,000 took to the streets of Prague. Dubbed the Velvet Revolution for its non-violent nature. The protests led to the resignation of the Communist Party's leadership on the 28th of November. And by December 10th of 1989, Czechoslovakia had a new government. And on December 29, Václav Havel, a dissident playwright who was in prison for several years, was elected the country's first democratic president in decades by a parliament dominated by communist hardliners. In 1992, Czechoslovakia split into two countries, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. In the decades-long struggle against white minority rule in South Africa, a pivotal moment came in 1976 in the Soweto township of Johannesburg. In South Africa, the apartheid system fueled violence and discrimination against black South Africans from 1948 to 1991. In a series of demonstrations starting June 16th in 1976, black students from multiple schools took to the streets to protest against being forced to study in Afrikaans, the Dutch-based language of the white rulers who designed the system of racial oppression known as apartheid. Afrikaans was being used for half the subjects taught in non-white schools. Thus, unequal education became a major part of apartheid. The protests spread to other areas in South Africa, becoming a flashpoint for anger at a system that denied adequate education, the right to vote, and other basic rights to the country's black majority. Armed police attacked the march, killing hundreds of people and injuring thousands. Students continued to organize, and anti-apartheid protests spread across the country, drawing international attention and condemnation of the apartheid regime. South Africa's first multiracial election happened on the 26th of April in 1994. The vote ended the white minority rule and swept Nelson Mandela to the presidency. Along with that, it brought massive positive changes in human rights, housing, education, healthcare, freedom of movement, and more. In Greece, in November 1973, students at Athens Polytechnic University rose up against the military junta that ruled Greece for more than 6 years. Military officers seized power in a 1967 coup, establishing a dictatorship marked by the arrest, exile, and torture of its political opponents. The regime's brutality and hardline rule gave rise to a growing opposition, particularly among students, and thus began the November uprising. The Polytechnic uprising was crushed by the US-backed military leadership then ruling Greece. Military and security forces used a tank to smash through the campus gates. The students were demanding free student elections to university bodies. Dozens of people were killed by government forces before and during the violent crackdown. The uprising led to the ouster of dictator Georgios Papadopoulos. He was overthrown by Greek military officer and hardliner Dimitrios Ioannidis. 54 years ago, American students protested the US involvement in Vietnam. When US President Richard Nixon authorized attacks on Cambodia in April 1970. On 4th of May, hundreds of students at Ohio's Kent State University gathered to protest the bombing of Cambodia. And authorities called in the Ohio National Guard to disperse the crowd. After failing to break up the protest with tear gas, the National Guard advanced and some opened fire on the crowd, killing 4 students and wounding 9 others. It is a tragedy that still resonates today. Also referred to as the May 4 massacre, the confrontation was a defining moment for a nation sharply divided over the prolonged conflict, in which more than 58,000 American soldiers died. It sparked a strike of 4 million students across the U.S., temporarily closing some 900 colleges and universities. The events also played a pivotal role in turning public opinion against the conflict in Southeast Asia.